On food security, we have to distinguish the issues into about two components. So the first component is about food sufficiency. And we are trying, for example, to map to see if crop production has been going down in the galamsey endemic areas over the period. And yes, we've seen some decline. One palpable evidence is in the cocoa sector, where clearly we see that cocoa production is declining. Why? Because there is this concept of land use or land change use behavior, where people decide to convert their lands into ventures that they believe is going to provide them better opportunities or better offers in terms of economic value. So farmers are beginning to, for example, convert their lands into galamsey areas. And in some cases, their lands have been taken over forcefully by the galamseyers. And we've seen examples with Asha Juan and her gang, where Asha Juan used to take lands from people who were not willing, or farmers who were not willing to sell their lands to her for her nefarious galamsey activities. So in terms of food security relative to sufficiency, where we can depend on the smallholder farmers to produce enough to feed us as a country, there is a decline. And recently, if you realized, when there was this drought spell, and I mentioned this on one of your programs, that if you want to see the failure of a government intervention, it is when that intervention fails to come to the rescue of the country when the need be. Yeah. An example is a planting for food and job. Planting for food and jobs was a brilliant idea, but I've always said that this approach to agriculture is not going to yield much, and it is not particular to the MPP, but if you look even from the time of since we gained independence, most governments have been using the same approach. We call it the Green Revolution approach. And since then, you would see that usually food would come in bumper harvest at a particular time, a short period, and then it goes down again. And now when we had a drought spell, you see that just 2 months of drought spell collapsed our food system to the extent that government needed over 8 billion to be able to rescue the situation and stabilize the food system. Otherwise, Ghana was going to be plunged into famine. And this, there is no doubt, per our tracing analysis, there's no doubt that galamsey has contributed to this. So that is the first part. Okay. The second part is the food, what we have categorized as food pollution potential. That is the safety of your food system, right? So how safe is your food system? Does galamsey have the potential to pollute your food system? MFA, the answer to this question is yes, because there are scientific evidence to prove that galamsey areas have heavy metal concentrations beyond the World Health Organization threshold in the soil, in the water, and then in some cases I've reviewed studies that have found traces in the food crops. And there is evidence to prove that plants have the ability to take up heavy metals like mercury, like lead, like arsenic, and all these heavy metals. So now the question is that there have been continuous evidence, or there have been evidence to prove that these heavy metals are finding their way into the human system, as has been demonstrated by Professor Sampeni and a host of others. And I think 2 days ago, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, also issued a statement where they directly say that galamsey-induced cancers across the country is about 24,000 per annum. So it is now, the evidence is so clear that heavy metals are finding their way into the human system. Now the question is, how are they finding their way? Is it through water? Is it through inhalation? So is it through, for example, ingestion? Is it through the dermal system, that is the skin, by way of direct contact with the heavy metals? And that is where we need scientists who are epidemiologists to be able to help us to trace exactly where these heavy metals are coming from. Is it because the galamsey areas, for example, people are inhaling heavy metals? Or is it because people are eating foods that have been contaminated with heavy metals? Or is it because they are drinking water that has been contaminated with heavy metals? this question must be answered by epidemiological studies. What we have done so far is to focus on the food system and then ask ourselves, according to the Ghana Food and Facts data provided by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture 2021, and normally they will produce a list of districts that have that contribute to Ghana's food basket. So usually they'll provide you the data of the first 10 districts. So what we've done is, okay, go into the first 10 districts, look at those that are galamsey endemic within the first 10, and then trace or ask yourself, what could be the proportion of their contribution to Ghana's food basket? Bear in mind, MFA, that the food crops have the potential of taking up the heavy metals. So we have developed an index known as the food pollution potential. And I think your producer showed some of it, and we are doing it for, almost all the crops. And we did, like this is for sorghum, for example. When you look at the food pollution potential of these districts, meaning that these are districts that fall within the first 10 districts that are leading producers of sorghum. What is their proportion of production in the entire scheme of affairs as far as sorghum production is concerned? MFA, we have a humongous 11.45%, meaning that these districts, their potential to pollute Ghana's sorghum, that is the beans that you use for your, how do I call it? So the food that we use for, I think they use it for tiozafi and for a host of other dishes, yes. So these food, if you are eating sorghum, the potential that the sorghum has been contaminated is about 11.45%. So out of if you have, let's say, 100 kilograms or let's say 100 grams of sorghum that you are going to eat, mind you, about 12 grams of the 100 grams is likely polluted as a result of galamsey activities. Okay. We've done that for corn, and for corn also, we can tell you that what we call the national food pollution potential is around 5.4%. So it means that if you take 100 grams of corn, if you're going to eat 100 grams of corn by way of making, let's say, banku or whatever food that you're going to make out of the corn, about 6 grams of that 100 grams is likely to be polluted because the corn could be coming from these galamsey endemic areas that we've mapped, right? So this is a very serious matter, that our food system, first of all, we've established that crops have the potential to take up the heavy metals. And secondly, we've been able to trace that most of the top 10 producers of these foods, some of them are galamsey endemic areas, which means that they are likely to pollute your food system by a certain margin or a certain percentage.
Sulemana, would leave it here for now and definitely make time to go through the entire study and your findings. But that's a situation of doom and gloom. If indeed our crops are able to take up these heavy metals, we should be concerned. The more reason why the hashtag is still on No to Galamsey. And in the last few days, we've been hearing from every institution that there is. We've heard from the Ghana Atomic Energy, we've heard from the CSIR, Aquaculture Group, the fisher folks, amongst others, all raising concerns about this, galamsey menace, and something ought to be done about it immediately. Maybe I'll stay on Zoom and then I'll come to the studio and wrap up on this.